The gloves were supposed to protect me. That is literally the one job they had. One job. Keep my hands covered, keep the psychometry locked down. Break time 05s. Keep me from accidentally touching a stranger and drowning in 30 years of their emotional baggage before I have finished my morning coffee. Break time 05 simple, manageable. A system I had maintained without failure for 6 consecutive years, and then the bus lurched, my bag strap snapped. Break time 5s, my gloves went flying into the Han River wind, and I watched them disappear over the railing of Mapo Bridge like 2 tiny fabric betrayals, so yes. Break time .05s, the day was already ruined before I even arrived at the building. My name is Seo Jiwoo. I am 22 years old. Break time 5s, I am an Omega in a city that treats that designation like either a punchline or a prize, depending on who is looking at me. Break time 5s, I work 3 part-time jobs, share a semi-basement apartment in Mapogu with a broken boiler and a cockroach I have named Congressman. Break time 05s, and I am currently 7 minutes late to a delivery shift that pays 30,001 per hour. Break time 05s, which is the only reason I am running through the lobby of KH Tower in Yoido in my worn sneakers and a jacket that has seen better decades. Break time 5s, I am not here for anything else. Break time marble 5s. I am not here for the marble floors or the wall of floor-to-ceiling glass or the security desk that looks like it costs more than my entire apartment. Break time 05s building. I am here to deliver 1 box of premium Korean pear tea to the 42nd floor, collect my confirmation signature, break time 05s and leave before anyone notices I do not belong here. That was the plan. The elevator doors opened, I stepped in, pressed 42, break time 05s, and the doors closed. Efficient, professional. Then a notification lit up my phone. Wrong building. The delivery address was KH Tower East. Break time 05s, I was in KH Tower West. They are connected by a sky bridge on the 20th floor. I got off on 20, followed the signs to the sky bridge. Break time 05s, not push through a set of heavy doors at the end of a carpeted hallway, and walk directly into the wrong universe. The room was enormous. Break time 05s, floor-length windows overlooked the Han River. White orchids lined every surface. Break time 5s, men in tailored suits stood in careful rows along both sides of the room, all of them young, all of them breathtakingly put together. Break time equal 5s, all of them Omega, I realized with a slow and dawning horror, because I could feel the subtle secondary scent layering the air even from the doorway. Break time, sweet and varied and carefully suppressed. Break time 05s, the way Omegas learn to suppress in professional spaces, because the world tells them their scent is inconvenient. And at the far end of the room, break time 05s, seated behind a long table like a panel of judges at the world's most terrifying interview, were 4 men. I felt them before I properly saw them. Break time 05s, alpha, all 4 of them. The scent hit me like a wall, complex and layered and completely overwhelming, pine and rain and something darker underneath. Break time E5s, warm, iron, and cedar, and a thread of something almost sweet that confused me because alphas are not supposed to smell sweet. Break time I05s, every single person in that room turned to look at me. I looked at the box of pear tea in my arms. I looked at the room. I looked at the 4 alphas. Break time 5s, I said the only thing my brain could produce under that level of pressure. I have a delivery. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Break time 05s. One of the alphas at the table, the one in the charcoal suit, with the kind of jawline that should be reported to the authorities. Break time 05s looked at me with an expression I could not read. Not anger, not confusion. Something quieter than both and twice dangerous. Break time 05s. Then a woman in a headset appeared at my elbow from absolutely nowhere and whispered with the bright professional terror of someone who has been, break time equal 5s, managing chaos for a living. Sir, the wife selection has already begun. If you could please take your place in line. I turned to look at her. Break time 05s. The what? The wife selection. For the Kang Group alphas. She gestured at the 4 men at the table as if that explained everything. Break time 05s, which it did not, which it absolutely did not. You are number 23. Please proceed to your position. I am a delivery person, I said. Break time 5s, very clearly, very slowly. The way you speak to someone when you need them to understand that a fundamental error has been made. I have pear tea. Break time 5s. For the 42nd floor of the other building, she glanced at my jacket, my sneakers, the box in my arms, and then break time .05s. Because the universe has a vicious sense of humor, the box shifted. I grabbed for it with my bare hand. Break time equal fives and my palm made full contact with the doorframe. The psychometry hit like a lightning strike fashes, fast and violent and completely uninvited. Break time, hundreds of people passing through this doorway. Anxiety and hope and desperation and grief. Break time .05s, the emotional residue of everyone who had walked through this door wanting something they were afraid they would not get. Break time .05s. It crashed through me in 2 seconds and I must have made a sound because the entire room moved and then someone was holding my arm and the scent of break time '05's pine and rain was so close it was all I could breathe. Hey. The voice was low, careful, like he was not sure how much sound I could handle. Break time '05's. Look at me. I looked up. The alpha with the jawline was crouching in front of me. Up close, he was worse. Dark eyes. Break time '05's, a small scar cutting through his left brow. Break time '05's, the kind of face that belonged on the cover of a magazine about men who have never once in their lives been told no. What just happened, he asked. Break time '05's, and I said, break time '05's, with the full dignity of a man who had just accidentally crashed a billionaire wife selection while having a psychometric episode in front of an break time '05's audience. I really just needed the signature. His mouth did something. It was not quite a smile. Break time .05's. It was the shape a smile makes right before it decides to happen. And somewhere behind him, one of the other alphas exhaled sharply. Break time, I heard it very clearly. Him. That one word dropped into the room like a stone into still water. I felt the ripples. Break time '05's, every omega in that line felt the ripples. Break time '05's. The collective tension that rolled through the room was so thick I could have cut it with the edge of my delivery box. I should clarify. I am not delusional. I know what I look like. I am 22, average height. Break time '05's. Currently wearing a jacket with a fraying left cuff and sneakers that have been resoled twice. Break time '05's. My hair was fixed this morning, but the bus wind had opinions. Break time '05's. I am not the kind of person that powerful men point at and say him in a room full of carefully selected, beautifully dressed candidates, and yet. Break time '05's. I turned slowly toward the voice because I am apparently the kind of person who cannot leave well enough alone. Break time. The alpha who had spoken was leaning back in his chair at the far end of the table, arms crossed. Break time equal fives, watching me with an expression that sat somewhere between amused and calculating. He was younger looking than the others, sharper somehow. Break time '05's, with an energy that reminded me of a lit match being held very close to something flammable. His scent reached me even across the room. Break time '05's, that warm iron thread I had caught earlier. It was his, I pointed at myself. Me, you, he confirmed. I have pear tea, I said again. Break time '05's. Because apparently this was now my entire personality, the alpha with the jawline, still crouching in front of me. Break time '05's made a sound that was definitively not a laugh and stood up. Up close, he was even more overwhelming. Break time '05's, the pine and rain scent wrapped around me before I could stop it, and something in my chest did a thing I did not give it permission to do. Break time '05's. He straightened his jacket, looked at me for exactly 1 second longer than necessary, and then turned to the woman with the headset. Break times, clear the room, he said. Quiet. Absolute. She blinked. Sir, break time '05's. The selection is scheduled for another 40 minutes, and the candidates have all traveled from clear it. The room cleared. Break time '05's. I watched 40-something omegas file out with the specific energy of people who were furious, but had been raised not to show it. Break time '05's. One of them caught my eye on the way past, and the look he gave me could have stripped paint. I mouthed sorry at him. He did not accept it. Break '05's. And then it was just me, 4 alphas. And a box of pear tea that had started all of this. I set the box down on the nearest surface, straightened up, break time '05's, and made a decision. I was leaving. I was going to walk out of this room with whatever dignity I had left, find the correct building, break time '05's, get my signature, finish my shift, go home, break time .05's, and tell Congressman the Cockroach about my day because he was the only one who would fully appreciate how spectacularly wrong everything had gone. A break time '05's. I turned toward the door. Your hands are still shaking. I stopped. It was a different voice this time, softer than the others. Break time '05's. I turned slightly and found the third alpha watching me from his seat. He had not moved, had not spoken until now. Break time '05's. And something about his stillness made him feel more present than the ones who had. He had the kind of face that took a moment to process. Break time .05's quietly devastating in a way that crept up on you. His scent was cedar and something almost like rain-soaked earth. Grounding. Annoyingly grounding. I'm fine, I said. You had an episode, he said, not unkindly. Just factual. The way someone states a thing they have already decided is true. Break time .05's. I tripped. People trip. You touched the door frame and went nonverbal for approximately 8 seconds. I stared at him. Break time of fives, you timed it. I noticed it, he said, which was somehow worse. The fourth alpha had not spoken at all yet. Break times. He sat at the end of the table, slightly apart from the others, dark and quiet in a way that made the air around him feel different. Break time 05's. His scent was the sweet thread I had not been able to place earlier. Understated, almost hidden. Break time 05's, like he had spent years learning to make himself smaller than he was. Break time 05's. He was watching me with an expression I could not name, and his hands were folded on the table very carefully. And something about that specific detail, break time 05's, sent a small involuntary flash through my psychometry even without contact controlled. He was very deliberately controlled. Break time .05's, that much I caught without even touching him, just from proximity, just from the residual emotional charge in the room. Whatever he was feeling, break time .05's, he had decided nobody was going to see it. Break time 05's. I filed that away and looked back at the one with the jawline because he seemed to be the one running things. Break time 05's. Can I go? What's your name? He asked. Seo Jiwoo, Kang Taeyang. He said it without ceremony, like I was supposed to know what that meant. Break time 05's. I did know what it meant. Everyone in Seoul knew what it meant. Kang Taeyang was the CEO of Kang Group. Break time and Al 5's, one of the top 5 conglomerates in the country. Break time 5's kind of man whose face appeared on financial news segments between words like unprecedented and aggressive acquisition. I had just crashed his wife, break time 05's, selection, with pear tea. Great, I said, so I can go? The corner of his mouth moved. No, my stomach dropped. Sit down. Break time 05, Seo Jiwoo. And because my body apparently had no loyalty to my survival instincts whatsoever, break time 05's. I sat down. I want to be clear that I did not sit down because Kang Taeyang told me to. Break time .05's. I sat down because my legs made a unilateral decision without consulting the rest of me, and by the time my brain filed a formal complaint, I was already in the fives, I was already in the chair. It was a very nice chair, soft leather, the kind that cost more than my rent. I noted this and hated it. Break time 05's. The 4 alphas looked at me. I looked back. Nobody spoke for a moment that stretched long enough to be genuinely uncomfortable. Break time 05's. And I want you to understand that I am not someone who finds silence uncomfortable. Break time 5's, I grew up learning to sit very still inside other people's emotional storms. Silence is fine. Silence is manageable. But this was not silence. Break time .05's. This was 4 alphas doing that thing where they communicate without speaking. Break time 5's, tiny glances and minute shifts in posture that carried full conversations. Break time 05's. And I was sitting in the middle of it like a pear tea delivery boy who had accidentally walked onto a stage during a performance he had not rehearsed. Break time 05's for. You're not here for the selection, Kang Taeyang said finally. It was not a question. Break time 05's. I have been trying to tell someone that since I walked through the door, I said. Break time 5's, and yet you walked through it. The Skybridge signs are genuinely misleading. Someone should file a complaint with building management. I paused. Break timing 05's. I will do it myself if you give me a pen and let me leave. The alpha who had timed my episode, whose name I still did not know, made a small sound. Break time 05's. I looked at him and he was looking at his water glass with the focused attention of someone trying very hard not to react to something. Break time 05's, the one with the warm iron scent, the sharp-edged one who had said him, like he was identifying something he had already decided to claim. Break time of 5's leaned forward with his elbows on the table and his chin resting on his linked hands, watching me with open curiosity. Psychometry? He asked. Break time 05's, my entire body went still. Break time .5's. I don't know what you're talking about. You touched the door frame and processed residual emotional charge, he said pleasantly. Break time .05's, that's psychometry. It's rare in omegas. Actually, it's rare in anyone. He tilted his head. How long? I looked at him for a long moment. Break time of 5's. Oh, Sejin. He smiled. It was the kind of smile that made you feel like you were already 3 steps behind him. How long? Break time of 5, Seo Jiwoo? Since I was 16, I said. Because apparently Oh Seo had a face that extracted information without permission. Break time 05s. I was going to need to build stronger defenses. And it's not something I discuss with strangers. We're not strangers anymore, he said. Break times 05s. You crashed our wife's selection. That's practically a bonding experience. I crashed nothing. Break time of fives. I walked through the wrong door, into a private event on a secured floor that requires keycard access. I opened my mouth, closed it. Break time .05s, looked at the door, looked back at him. The door was open. It was propped open for ventilation. The quiet alpha at the end of the table said, "Break." His voice was low and even, and it landed differently from the others, like a hand pressed flat against something that had been vibrating too fast. Break time fives, it wasn't an invitation. Thank you, I said. Finally, someone with a logical perspective. I agree completely. It was not an invitation. Break time, it was a ventilation door. I am going to leave through it now. Hyunjae, Kong Taeyong said. The quiet alpha, Hyunjae apparently, looked at him. Break time 05s. Show him the footage. I did not like the word footage. I did not like the way Taeyong said it, measured and deliberate. Break time 05s, like he was placing a card on a table face down and waiting for me to flip it. I sat very still while Hyunjae, whose full name I still did not have. Break time 05s turned a tablet on the table toward me. It was security footage. Timestamped. The Skybridge hallway, clear as anything. Break time equals showing me walking with complete confidence past 3 separate signs that read in large Korean lettering. Private event. Offers personal only. Break time 05s. I stared at the screen for a long time. I was reading my phone, I said. Clearly, Oh Sejun said, with enormous warmth and zero sympathy. Break time 05s. In my defense, I had just lost my gloves off Mapo Bridge and my entire system was compromised. Your gloves, Kong Taeyang repeated. Break time 05s, and his eyes dropped briefly to my bare hands on the table, and something shifted in his expression that I could not fully read. Break time, I pulled my hands into my lap. Old reflex. Look, I said, aiming for reasonable, which was difficult given the circumstances. Break times 05s. I understand that I walked into a restricted event. I understand that is technically trespassing. Break times 05s. But I am a delivery person on a shift that is now 40 minutes past due. Break time 05s, and the only thing I have done in this room is exist in the wrong place at the wrong time, which, respectfully, break time of fives is not a crime in this country. The Cedar and Earth Alpha, the one who had noted my shaking hands, spoke for only the second time. What's your name? Break time 05s, your full name. I already told him, I said, nodding at Taeyong. Tell me, there was nothing aggressive in it, nothing demanding. Break time 05s. It was just quiet and direct, and somehow that was more impossible to refuse than a command would have been. Seo Jiwoo, I said. He nodded once. Break times 05s, like he was filing it somewhere careful. Yoon Doha, 4 names, 4 alphas, 1 catastrophically wrong door. Break time 05s, and then my phone buzzed on the table between us. Screen up, the notification visible to everyone in the room, delivery cancelled. Break time equals complaint filed. Penalty to stuck. The silence that followed was devastating. Perfect, I said. Break time equal fives, absolutely perfect. Nobody at the table offered condolences. Oh Sejun looked like he was actively enjoying himself. Break time 05's Yoon Doha was watching me with that careful stillness that was starting to make me feel like a specimen under glass. Break time 05's Kang Tang had not moved at all. And the 4th alpha, break time 5s. Whose not his name I still did not have because nobody had introduced him and he seemed entirely comfortable existing as a beautiful unsolved mystery. Break time 5s was looking at my phone with an unreadable expression. I picked up my phone. 60,001 penalty. Gone. Just like that. Break time 05's 2 hours of work evaporated because I had misread a Skybridge sign while grieving my gloves. I breathed in through my nose and out through my mouth. Break time .05's, which is the technique my therapist taught me for moments when the world is being actively unreasonable. And I placed my phone face down on the table. Break time, I looked at Kong Taeyong. I would like to leave now, I said. Very calm, very collected. Extremely lying about how calm and collected I was. Break time .05's the penalty, Taeyong said. How much? That is not your concern. How much, Seo Jiwoo? I considered refusing again. Break time 05's. Then I looked at his face and understood that this was a man who was accustomed to asking exactly twice before the universe simply handed him what he break time 05's wanted. I found that irritating in a way that was doing something uncomfortable to my pulse. 60,001, I said. He reached into his jacket. Break time 5s, I watched him produce a slim card holder, remove a card and set it on the table and slide it across to me in one unhurried motion. Black card. Break time 05s. No visible limit. The kind of card that exists in a category beyond what I could conceptualize on a Tuesday afternoon. I stared at it. Break time Hingwell 5s. I'm not taking your card. It covers your penalty and your inconvenience. I don't need compensation from a billionaire for walking through the break time equal 5s wrong door. Break time 05s. I need to leave and finish my shift and pretend this afternoon didn't happen. Your shift has a penalty on record, Sejin said helpfully. Break time, most platforms flag that. Could affect your rating. I turned to look at him slowly. Break? Why do you know how delivery platforms work? He shrugged with the easy confidence of someone who researched everything and was never embarrassed. Break time 05s about it. I know how most things work. That's unsettling, I said. Please stop helping me. The fourth alpha moved. Break time 05s. It was the first significant movement he had made since I sat down. And because he had been so still for so long, it caught my attention completely. Break time 5s. He reached across the table, picked up the black card, and held it out to me directly. Up close, his scent was stronger. That sweet thread, break time 05s, warm and layered underneath with something that reminded me of old books and sandalwood. Break time 5s. It made absolutely no sense for an alpha to smell like old books and sandalwood, and I was annoyed at how much I noticed it. Take it, he said. Break time 05s, his voice was quiet. Genuinely quiet, not performed quietness, just a person who did not feel the need to be loud. It's not charity. Break time 05s, you're here because of us. The event was on this floor. The door was propped open by our staff. That's our responsibility. I looked at the card. Break time 5s looked at his hand. Bare, steady. Break time 05s. My psychometry pulsed a warning at the base of my skull, the way it always did when proximity to strong emotion got too close without a barrier. Break time of 5s. No gloves. If I reached out and my fingers made contact with his skin even for a second, I would get everything. Whatever he was carrying, break time 05s, whatever was underneath that careful, controlled expression. Break time 05s, it would pour through me uninvited, and I would have to stand here in front of 4 alphas and process someone else's entire emotional history with no break time 05s protection. I took the card by the very edge, avoided contact by approximately 3 millimeters, exhaled. Thank you, I said stiffly. Break time 05s. This covers the penalty. I'll pay back the rest. There is no rest, he said. Keep it. Absolutely not. It's a card. Break time equal 5s, not a contract. In my experience, I said, tucking it into my jacket pocket with the energy of someone handling a live grenade, break time 05s, nothing given by powerful people comes without a cost. So I will use exactly 60,001 and return the card by courier. Break time of 5s. What's the address? The silence that followed was interesting, not uncomfortable. Something closer to surprised.
Break time 05s.
Like I had said something that did not compute against their expectations. Taeyong looked at me with that expression again. The one I could not name. Break time of 5, quiet and focused and slightly dangerous. Park Minjin, he said. I blinked. What? He nodded toward the 4th alpha. His name. Break time 05s. Since you didn't ask. I looked at Park Minjin. Park Minjin looked back at me. Something in his expression had shifted by approximately 2 degrees. Break time emo 5s, which on his particular face registered as significant. Right, I said. Seo Jiwoo, delivery person, trespasser apparently. Break time 05s. Going home now. I stood up, picked up the box of pear tea because I was not leaving evidence, turned toward the door. Break time selection ends today, Taeyong said behind me. None of them were right. I stopped walking. I do not know why I stopped walking. Break not of 5s. I should not have stopped walking. That must be disappointing, I said, facing the door. Come back tomorrow, he said. Break time 05s, same time. My hand found the door handle, cold metal, no residual emotion, mercifully clean. I have a shift tomorrow. I know, he said simply. Break time .05s. The way he said it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up, because it did not sound like a guess. Break time 05s. I pushed through the door and walked away very fast and did not look back. Break time 05s. My heart was doing something it had absolutely no business doing. I told it to stop. It did not stop. Break time 05s. I took the elevator down to the lobby, walked out through the revolving glass doors into the late afternoon air of Yeouido, break time of 5s, and stood on the pavement outside KH Tower West while the Han River wind did its best to reorganize my hair, Break time equal fives. And I had a very serious internal conversation with myself about what had just happened. The conversation went like this. Break time equals 05s. You walked into the wrong room. Correct. Break time .05s, you met four alphas who are apparently some kind of pack unit running a wife selection like it was a corporate procurement process. Also correct. Break time 05s. One of them told you to come back tomorrow, deeply concerning. And your body, which is supposed to be on your side, break time fives responded to four different alpha scents simultaneously without shutting down or running, which is, medically speaking, unusual enough to be alarming. Break time fives. I pulled my jacket tighter and started walking toward the bus stop. Break time on 05s. The thing about psychometry that nobody tells you is that it does not turn off cleanly. A strong reading leaves a residue. Break time fives like an emotional echo that fades slowly over hours. The doorframe hit had been significant. I could still feel the edges of it. Break time .05s, all that compressed hope and anxiety from hundreds of people who had walked through that door wanting something. Break time 05s. It sat in my chest like secondhand grief, and I breathed through it the way I had learned to breathe through it, steadily, without fighting it. Break time .05s. What I could not breathe through quite as easily was the fact that Park Min-jin's outstretched hand had been approximately 3 millimeters from break time 05s becoming the most catastrophic accidental reading of my adult life. I had felt it even without contact. Break time 05s. The emotional charge rolling off him was dense and layered and carefully, painstakingly suppressed. Break time 05s, and whatever was underneath that suppression, was significant enough that my ability had reached toward it like a compass finding north. Break time 05s that had never happened without touch before. Break time 05s. I did not know what to do with that information, so I put it in the same mental drawer where I kept other things I refused to examine. Break time 05s. Labeled it Do Not Open and kept walking. My phone buzzed. I looked down expecting my shift supervisor and found instead an unknown number. Break time 05s, a message that read, Your delivery penalty has been reversed. Have a good evening. No name, no explanation. Break time 05s. I stopped walking in the middle of the pavement. A man behind me made an annoyed sound and stepped around me. I did not move. 60,001. Break time .05s. E back in my account. Just like that, I typed back, Who is this? How do you have this number? This is a violation of my personal data. Break time of fives, 3 dots appeared immediately. Then Sejun. And we have your delivery platform profile. It was accessible. Break time equal fives. You should update your privacy settings. I stared at my phone. Then I typed, That is illegal. His response came in 2 seconds. Technically. Break time 05s. I put my phone in my pocket and resumed walking with the energy of a man who was not going to think about any of this anymore.
Break fives.
I had 3 hours before my evening shift at the convenience store in Hapjeong. I was going to go home, eat whatever was in my refrigerator, break time E.5s, which I was fairly certain was 1 egg and half a block of tofu, break time 05s. And I was going to have a normal evening and wake up tomorrow and not go back to KH Tower at any time for any reason. Break time 05s. This plan lasted exactly 14 hours, I know. In my defense, I did not go back voluntarily. Break time 05s. I went back because the next morning's delivery assignment, generated automatically by the platform's routing algorithm, sent me to KH Tower West. Break time 05s to 42nd floor, with a package addressed to Kang Group executive offices. Break time 05s. I sat on my bicycle outside the building for 4 full minutes, reading the assignment details and looking for a loophole. There was no loophole. Break time, peepin' 05s. Refusing an assignment this size would tank my rating. The penalty from yesterday was already a mark I needed to recover from. I needed this job. Break time equal fives. Congressman the cockroach needed this job. The dream of a semi-functional boiler needed this job. I put on my backup gloves. Break time 05s, the thin cotton ones I kept for emergencies. Checked that they were secure and went inside. The lobby security recognized me. Break time 05s. I could tell because the guard on the left did a small double take and then looked very carefully at his desk. I signed in at reception. Break time 05s collected my visitor pass and rode the elevator to 42 with the focused calm of someone defusing a bomb. Break time 05s. The executive floor was different from the Skybridge room. All glass and clean lines, the kind of office that communicated power through absence. Break time, nothing unnecessary, nothing soft. A receptionist directed me to a side room to wait for signature confirmation. I waited. 2 minutes. 5. Break time 05s. I examined my cotton gloves and thought about breakfast, which I had not had because the egg had turned out to be expired. Then the door opened. Break time 05s, it was not the receptionist. Yoon Do-ah stood in the doorway in a charcoal suit, looking at me with that careful expression. Break time at 5, that felt like being read in a language I had not agreed to be written in. You came back, he said. I have a delivery, I said. Break time 05s. For the third time in less than 24 hours, something moved through his expression. Not amusement exactly. Break time 05s, something gentler and more dangerous than amusement. Break time 5s, he stepped into the room and closed the door behind him, and the cedar and rain-soaked earth scent closed around me like a hand. Break time 05s. Taeyang said you wouldn't come, he said quietly. Taeyang was almost right, I said. Break time 05s, but you're here. Against my will and my better judgment and the direct advice of my own common sense, yes. I held up the package. Sign, please. He looked at the package, looked at my gloved hands, looked at my face. Those aren't your usual gloves, he said. Break time pint 05s. The fact that he remembered what my hands had looked like yesterday and had noticed the difference in 24 hours, break time .05s did something to my chest that I absolutely refused to acknowledge. Sign, I said, please. Yoon Do-ha signed. He did it slowly, deliberately. Break time 05s, like a man who had decided that every action he took in my presence was going to be performed at a pace designed to make me pay attention. Break time 05s. He handed the tablet back and his fingers did not touch mine, which I appreciated, and which I was also furious about appreciating. Break time of 5s, Taeyong wants to see you, he said. Break time 5s, I have 4 more deliveries after. After I have 4 more deliveries, I am going home. Jiwoo, it was the first time any of them had dropped. Break time 05s, the formal address, and used just my name, and the way Do-ha said it, quiet and even. Break time 05s, like it was something he had already decided belonged in his vocabulary, hit differently than I was prepared for. Break time 05s. I picked up my delivery bag and looked at the door. Tell Taeyang, I said carefully, that I am a delivery person, not a candidate. Break time 05s. And that if he needs someone for his wife's selection, he should repost the listing. Because I am not available, not interested. Break time 05s and also not a wife. Do-ha was quiet for a moment, then he knows that. Good. He wants to offer you a job. I stopped with my hand on the door. Break time 05s, what kind of job? A legitimate one. In our office. Paid significantly above market rate. I turned around slowly. Break time 05s Do-ha was watching me with that same careful expression, and I searched his face for the part where this became a joke and could not find it. Break time 05s. Why, I said, because you have psychometry, you're clearly intelligent. Break times. And you told Oh Sejun his unauthorized access to your personal data was illegal to his face without flinching. Something close to warmth moved, break time 05s, through his eyes. That last part specifically impressed everyone. It should have frightened me into silence, I said. Which, for reference, break time 05 is what most people do when confronted with that level of money and power. Yes, Do-ha said simply. Break time .05s, that's why. I stood there for a moment with the full weight of this conversation pressing down on me and tried to find the rational exit. Break time 05s, the rational's exit, and it was no thank you, goodbye, I will return the black card by courier as promised. Break time .05s, the rational exit was clean and safe and involved 0 additional contact with 4 alphas who smelled collectively like a nature documentary about break time equal 5s things that were beautiful and dangerous. I'll think about it, I said, which was not the rational exit. Break time 05s. Send me the details. His expression did not change, but something in it settled, like a door closing softly. Break Jinwoo 5s. Oh Sejun will contact you. Tell Oh Sejun to use a legal channel this time. I left before he could respond, walked to the elevator. Break time equals NOS 5 and stood inside it with my eyes closed for all 12 floors of the descent, breathing slowly. Break time evil 5s, trying to reorganize the inside of my chest into something that resembled its original configuration. Break time 05s. By the time I reached the lobby, I had made a decision. I was going to read the job details, that was all. Reading was not agreeing. Break times 05's reading was information gathering. Break times 5s, I was an intelligent person capable of evaluating an opportunity without being pulled into something I did not choose. Break times 05s, my phone buzzed before I reached the revolving door, Oh Sejun. A contract document, 3 pages. Break time 5s, with a salary figure at the top that made me stop walking for the second time in 2 days, in a location where stopping was inconvenient for everyone. Break time equals 5s around me. The man behind me said something rude. I did not register it. The number on that contract was more than all three of my jobs combined. Break time 05s monthly. Break time 05s. It was more than I made in 4 months of overlapping shifts and missed sleep and convenience store nights that smelled like ramen broth and break time 5 5s, loneliness. I stared at it for a long time. Then I scrolled to the job description. Research consultant. Break time 05s, specialization in emotional intelligence and object analysis. Discrete, flexible hours. Office located on the 42nd floor of KH Tower West. Break time 5s, they wanted to hire me for my psychometry. They wanted me to use my ability professionally in a controlled environment. Break time 05s, for compensation that would change the material reality of my life in ways I had stopped letting myself imagine, because imagining things that were not break time 05s possible was a form of self-harm I had given up at 19. I sat down on a bench outside the building. Break time of 5s, a pigeon landed near my feet and looked at me judgmentally. I looked back. I know, I told it. It did not offer useful advice. Break time 5s. I thought about my broken boiler. Break time .05s. I thought about Congressman, the cockroach and the expired egg and the fraying cuff on my jacket and the 300,001 in my account that break time 05s had to cover rent, utilities, and food for the next 3 weeks. Break time 05s. I thought about what it felt like to stand in that room yesterday and have four alphas look at me like I was something they had not expected and could break time equals 05s, not stop noticing. That last thought was the dangerous one. I pushed it down firmly. I opened my reply to Oh Shijun and typed, I have conditions. Break time equals 05s. His response was instantaneous, obviously. Name them, and just like that, without fully deciding to, break time .5s. I stepped off the edge of the life I knew and into something I did not have a name for yet. If you are watching this and you felt that, break time 05s. If your heart just did the thing, you are exactly where you are supposed to be. Subscribe so you do not miss what happens next, because I promise you, break time 05s, it gets so much worse before it gets beautiful. Hit that subscribe button. Break time 05s, drop a comment telling me which alpha you think Jiwoo is going to fall for first, and let's find out together. The conditions I sent were reasonable. Break time all 5s, professional. Completely logical. Taeyong's response arrived 4 minutes later, not from Oh Sejun's number but from a new one, break time 05s, and it contained exactly 4 words. Start on Monday. I read it 4 times. Then I screenshotted it, break time 05s, sent it to my own number as a backup, and sat on that bench outside KH Tower West until the pigeon got bored and left. I could not blame it. Break time 05s, I was also bored of my own spiraling. Monday was 3 days away. I spent those 3 days doing 3 things. Working my remaining shifts, break time equal 5s bought D buying 1 pair of proper leather gloves from a second-hand shop in Hongdae that fit well enough to function, break time 05s, and absolutely not thinking about 4 specific alphas. And the way their combined scent had done something to my secondary designation that I was break time .05s, medically refusing to investigate. I was mostly successful at 2 of those 3 things. Monday arrived the way inevitable things do, break time 05s without asking permission. I showed up to KH Tower West at 8:45 in the morning in the cleanest clothes I owned, break time 05s, which was a dark green button-up, dark trousers, and the new second-hand gloves, and I told myself very firmly that this was just a job. A well-paying, break time equals 05s Dopti life-altering job that I was approaching with complete professionalism and zero personal investment in the 4 extremely attractive alphas who had break time 05s created it specifically for me. The receptionist on 42, break time 5 calm beta, named Shin Hyosang, who had the organized energy of someone who had survived considerable chaos and made peace with it. Break time 05 showed me to a small office, glass-walled, clean desk, a window that looked out over the Han River. Break time equal 5s. On the desk was a pair of professional-grade psychometry gloves, the kind that cost 400,001 in specialist shops. Break times 05s, thin enough to allow fine motor function, but insulated enough to block passive readings. I picked them up and looked at them for a long moment. Break time 05s, nobody had ever bought me professional gloves before. Break times 05s. The people in my life who knew about my ability treated it like a problem to be managed or a curiosity to be prodded. Break time of fives, these gloves said something different. They said, we know what you need and we handled it before you had to ask. I put them on. They fit perfectly. Break time .05s. I had approximately 30 seconds to appreciate this before the office door opened, and Oh Sejun walked in with 2 coffees and the expression of a break time plot man who had been looking forward to this moment. You actually came, he said, setting 1 coffee on my desk. Break time '05s, I said I would. People say things. He sat down in the chair across from me without being invited. The break time '5s, which I was already learning, was simply how Oh Sejun operated in spaces. He occupied them. Break time '05s, how are the gloves? You picked them. Taeyang approved the budget. Doha researched the brand. Break time '5s, Minjun specified the fit based on your hand measurements from the security footage. He said all of this with complete casualness. Equal fives, like 4 powerful men collaborating on the correct glove size for a new employee, was entirely normal. I just placed the order. I stared at him. Break time '05s. Minjin measured my hands from security footage. He has a good eye for detail. That is either very thoughtful or deeply unsettling, and I cannot break time '05 decide which. Oh Sejun smiled over his coffee cup. With Minjin it's usually both. I filed that away and looked at my desk. Breaks grow fives. There was a single object on it beside the gloves and the coffee. A small ceramic figurine, old, the glaze worn in places, wrapped loosely in cloth. Break time looked at it without touching it. First assignment, Oh Jejun said, following my gaze. Came in last week. Break time Fao's antique dealer in Insadong sold it to a private collector who wants provenance verification. Previous owner's history, emotional context, break time whole fives. Anything you can get. That's what this job actually is, I said slowly. Provenance reading. Break time '05's emotional archaeology, among other things. He leaned forward slightly. There are other applications we'll discuss as you settle in. Break time '05s, but this is the baseline. You read objects, you document what you find. Break time equals '05s that we verify against historical record where possible and provide reports to clients. He paused. You'll be well protected. Break time '05s. Nothing you read leaves this office without your consent. You control what goes into the report. I looked at him. Break time '05s, whose idea was that clause? Minjin's, he said, without hesitation. Something shifted in my chest. Break time '05s. I picked up the ceramic figurine through my gloves. Nothing. Good insulation. Break time '05s. I set it down and thought about what it would mean to do this work properly, with protection, with boundaries. Break time '05s with compensation that made the risk worth taking. Where are the others? I said. Taeyang has a board meeting until 10. Doha is in legal. Break time '05s Minjin works from the corner office and comes out when he decides to. Oh Sejun tilted his head. Break time emo 5s, why? I'm not asking because I want to see them, I said quickly. Break time '05s. Of course not. I'm asking for professional orientation purposes, naturally. Stop smiling like that. He did not stop smiling like that. Break time '05s. He stood up, straightened his jacket, and moved toward the door. Weekly team meeting is Thursday at 2. All 4 of us plus you. Break time '05s. Try not to look too alarmed when Taeyang walks in. He reads intimidation as interest. I am not interested, I said. Break time '5s? Minjin says that too, Oh Sejun said pleasantly. About you, every day since Tuesday. He pulled the door open. Welcome to Kang Group. Break time 5 Seo Jiwoo. He left before I could process what he had just said. Minjin says that too. About you. Every day since Tuesday. Break time '5s. I sat very still at my clean desk with my perfect gloves and my river view and the ceramic figurine waiting patiently for me to do my job. Break time '05s. And I thought about Park Minjin in that room on the first day, hands folded carefully on the table. Break times '05s. Expression controlled to the point of architecture and the way my psychometry had reached toward him without permission every day since Tuesday. Break time '05s 3 days. He had been doing something, thinking something, caring something about me for 3 days. Break time '05s, and whatever it was, ran deep enough that Oh Sejun had noticed it and was telling me about it on my first morning like a warning disguised as gossip. Break time '05s. I picked up my coffee, took a slow sip, looked out at the Han River, then the door to the corner office at the end of the hall opened. Break time '05s. And Park Minjin stepped out and looked directly at my glass wall, and our eyes met across the distance of the entire floor. He did not look away. Break time '05s, neither did I. And that was the moment I understood. Break time oval fives. With the specific clarity of someone whose entire ability was built around reading truth through contact, break time .05s. That I was in a very significant amount of trouble. Park Min-jin walked toward my office with the unhurried certainty of someone who, break time .05s, had already decided how this interaction was going to go. I had approximately 4 seconds to arrange my face into something that did not broadcast the fact that my psychometry was doing that reaching thing. Break time .05s again, that compass-finding North Pole that had no business happening without physical contact. He knocked once on the glass door, a courtesy knock. Break time .05s, the kind you do when you have already decided to come in. Come in, I said, because what else was I going to say? Break times. He opened the door and stood in the frame, and for a moment neither of us said anything. Up close, in the clean morning light from the river window, break time. The careful control Canna's expression was more visible than it had been in the selection room. It was not coldness. Break times .05s, I understood that now in a way I had not on the first day. It was containment. Break times .05s, like a person who had learned very early that feeling things openly was a liability and had built an entire architecture around managing it. Break time .05s. My ability ached toward that like a bruise being pressed. How are the gloves? He said. Oh, Sejun already asked me that, I said. Break time .05s, I'm asking again. They fit well. Thank you. For the sizing. Something moved through his eyes, there and gone. Break time .5s. You're good at keeping your expression neutral, he said. Most people react more when they're being read. I'm not reading you, I said. Break time .05s. I'm not touching anything. I know. He stepped fully into the office. Break time .05s, and the sandalwood and old book scent settled into the room like it belonged there, which was an outrageous thing for a scent to do. Break time .05s. I meant in general. You have a very controlled face for someone whose ability requires that much emotional exposure. I looked at him for a moment. Break time you research psychometry. Extensively, he said without apology. Why? He was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Break time .05s. Because you're going to be working here. And I wanted to understand what that means for you. Break time .05s, what the ability costs. Nobody had ever framed it that way before. Not as a curiosity, not as a useful tool.
A break time .05s.
But as something with a cost that mattered. I felt that land somewhere unprotected and immediately resented it. It's manageable, I said. Break time .05s, with proper gloves and controlled exposure, yes. He looked at the ceramic figurine on my desk. Break time .05s. Don't let Sejun push the timeline on the first reading. Break time .05s, take the time you need. He seemed pretty reasonable about it. Sejun is reasonable until he's curious. Break time .05s, and then he is relentless. Min-jin looked back at me. I'll make sure he gives you space. You don't need to manage my working conditions, I said. Break time .05s, keeping my voice even. That's what my contract is for. I'm not managing you, he said. Break time .05s. I'm being careful with you. The difference between those two things hit me somewhere I was not prepared for, and I looked away first. Break time =5s, which I had not intended to do and which I was immediately annoyed about. The Thursday meeting, I said. Break time .05s, directing with the energy of a man grabbing a lifeline. Is there a format I should prepare for? He accepted the redirect. Taeyong runs it. Break time .5s, bring questions. He respects people who come prepared. A pause. Doha will have read everything about you before you walk in. Break time .05s. Don't be unsettled by how much he already knows. It's how he makes people feel safe. And Sejun will be entertained by all of it, I said. Break time =5s. The corner of Min-jin's mouth moved. That almost smile, restrained at the last moment by years of practice containment. Break times .05s, yes. What about you, I said. Break times .05s. And then immediately wished I had not, because it was too direct and too personal. And it stepped over the professional line I had drawn for this. Break time .5s conversation. But Min-jin did not deflect. He looked at me steadily and said, I'll be paying attention. 3 words. Break time =5s, quiet and simple, and somehow the most unsettling thing anyone had said to me since I walked through that sky bridge door. Break times .05s, because it did not sound like a threat or a flirtation or a power move. It sounded like a fact he had already made peace with. I break time .05s. I was trying to formulate a response that was professional and appropriately distant when my gloved hand shifted on the desk and made contact with break time .05s. Ceramic figurine. The reading hit instantly. Not the antique dealer's history, not the private collector. something older and much closer. Break time see an emotional signature so recent it was practically warm, layered into the cloth wrapping around the figurine. Break time 5, someone had held this object with significant feeling very recently, today. This morning I pulled my hand back, looked at Minjin. Break time is in 05s. He was watching me with an expression that was no longer quite as contained as it had been 30 seconds ago. You wrapped this, I said. Break time 05s, this morning. His jaw tightened by a fraction. The cloth was loose. Minjin. I said his name the way Doha had said mine. Quiet, direct. Break time 05s. I read you through the wrapping. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had experienced in that office. His scent shifted. Break time 05s. That sweet sandalwood thread deepening into something rawer underneath. Break time .05s, and I felt my psychometry search against the gloves. Because whatever emotion had just broken the surface of his control was enormous, and he was break time of 5s fighting to contain it and losing by degrees. What did you read, he said. Very quiet. I looked at him for a long moment. Break time 05s, the honest answer was terrifying. Break time 05s. The honest answer was that what I had felt through that cloth was not professional interest or alpha curiosity or any of the things I had been break time 05s to carefully filing this situation under. It was longing, specific and painful and aimed directly at me. Enough, I said softly. Break time 5s, he looked away first this time. Break time 05s. And the room held both of us in a silence that had completely stopped being comfortable and started being something else entirely. Break time 05s, something with weight and heat, and the particular tension of two people standing on opposite sides of a line that one of them had just accidentally. Break time 05s revealed they were already thinking about crossing. Longing. His longing. Sitting in my chest now like something that belonged to me. Break time Eagle 5s. Which was the cruelest thing about psychometry that nobody who had not lived it could understand. Break time .05s. You read someone's emotion and it does not stay separate. It becomes part of your own emotional landscape. Break times 05s, indistinguishable, after a while from something you felt yourself. I was already in trouble before this morning. Break time .05s. Now I was in a different category of trouble that did not have a clean name. I should let you start work, Minjin said. His voice was level again. Break time 05s, the containment was back, rebuilt in the space of a few seconds with the sufficiency of someone who had been doing it for a very long time. Break time .05s, but I had read what was underneath it now, and I could not unread it, and we both knew that. Minjin, I said. He stopped at the door. Break time equal .05s. How long? I said. Not a full question. He would understand it. A pause that lasted long enough to tell me the answer before he spoke it. Break time 05s. Since you told my brother that his unauthorized data access was illegal, he said quietly. Break time 05s, and then asked for a pen to file a building complaint. I stared at the back of his head. That was the first day. Break toned me for 11 minutes. 10, he said. Sejin timed it. And then he walked out before I could respond. Break bleak time .05s, pulling the door, closed behind him with a soft click that echoed in the silence, like a period at the end of a sentence I had not finished reading. Break time 05s. I sat at my desk for a full minute without moving. Then I picked up my coffee, found it had gone cold. Break time 05s. And drank it anyway because I needed something to do with my hands and my mouth that was not thinking about Park Min-jin and 10 minutes and a longing. Break time 05s, so dense it had soaked through professional gloves and cloth wrapping and every careful boundary I had constructed around this situation. Break time 5s. The Thursday meeting arrived before I had finished recalibrating, all four of them in one room. A conference table. City view. Break time Al 5s, the combined alpha scent, doing what it always did when they were together, and the break time 05s layering and deepening into something that pressed against my secondary designation in ways I was learning to manage but had not yet mastered. Break time .05s. I sat at the end of the table with my notebook and my questions and my best professional expression and told myself very firmly that I was a break time 5s consultant attending a work meeting and nothing else. Taeyong opened. Structured, efficient, break time equal 5s, covering project updates with the focused authority of someone who had run meetings since before it was legal for him to drive. Break time 05's Doha contributed in measured sentences that contained more information per word than anyone else at the table. Break time 05's. Sejun made 3 jokes in 20 minutes and somehow each one landed with surgical precision at the exact moment tension needed releasing. Break. Minjun said almost nothing. He sat across from me and took notes, and twice, when I was mid-sentence answering a question from Taeyong, break time 05s. I looked up and found him already watching me with an expression he did not bother to hide the way he had on the first day. Break times 05s. I lost my train of thought both times. Oshijin noticed both times. He said nothing, which was somehow worse than if he had said something. Break time 05s. After the meeting, Taeyong asked me to stay. The others filed out, and Doha paused at the door and looked at me with that reading expression of his. Break time equal 5s, the one that felt like being understood in a language I had not chosen. And then he left too, and it was just Taeyong, and the city view, and the residual warmth of 4 alpha cents slowly dissipating. Break time 05s. How are you finding it? Taeyong said. The work is interesting, I said honestly. The gloves help. The first reading went well. He nodded. Break time 5s and the rest of it. I looked at him carefully. You'll need to be more specific. Something in his expression shifted. This was the moment. I break time 05s, I realized that the meeting had been building toward, not the project updates, not the logistics, this. Break time 05s. The selection ended without a result, he said. The pack has been incomplete for 3 years. Break time 05s. We need a 4th bond to stabilize. He looked at me directly. You know this already. Times 05s. You read enough in that room on the first day to understand what we are. I read a door frame, I said. Break time E.05s. Not any of you. You read Minjun through a cloth wrapping, he said. Sejun told me. I was going to have a conversation with Oh Sejun about the definition of discretion. Break time pints 05s, that was accidental. I know. Taeyong leaned forward slightly. Everything about you in this building has been accidental. Break time 05s. You walked through the wrong door. You took the wrong elevator. You came back because of a routing algorithm. He paused. Break time 05s. And yet, I repeated carefully. The pack responds to you, he said. All 4 of us. Break time 05s. In 3 years of selection events, we have never responded to anyone. His voice was even, but something underneath it was not. Break time .05s. That is not coincidence in omegaverse biology. That is not something that can be manufactured or forced. My heart was doing the thing again.
Break time 5s.
I pressed my gloved hands flat on the table. I am your employee. Yes, this is a significant conflict of interest. Yes, he said again. Break time .05s. And the honesty of it, the complete absence of deflection, break times in 05s did something to my carefully constructed professional distance that I could not immediately repair. Taeyang, I said. Break time 05s, and his eyes sharpened at his name in my mouth. I need you to understand something. Break time 05s. I have spent 6 years managing an ability that makes every unguarded touch a liability. Break time 05s. I have spent 6 years keeping people at exactly the distance required to stay functional. Break time am not built for whatever this is. He was quiet for a moment. Then, what did you read from Minjun? The question landed like a stone. Break time 05s. I held his gaze. That is between me and him. Something moved through Taeyong's expression, not hurt exactly. Something more complicated. Break reached across the table and placed his hand palm up between us. Open, bare, an offer, not a demand. Then read me, he said quietly. No barriers. Break time 05s, whatever you find. I won't ask you to report it. I looked at his hand, then at his face. Break time equal 5s, the pine and rain scent deepened, and I felt it in my sternum, that pull. Break time 05s. That compass north drag that had been building since the first day, and that I had been cataloging under every clinical term I could find to avoid, break time equals 05s, calling it what it was. My glove came off slowly, finger by finger. I placed it on the table beside his hand. Break 5s. My bare fingers hovered 1 centimeter above his palm, 1 centimeter between me and everything he was carrying. If I do this, I said. Break time equal 5's, voice lower than I intended. I cannot unknow it. I know, he said. And you still want me to. I have wanted nothing else, he said. Break time equal 5s, since you walked through that door with pear tea and asked for a pen. My fingers descended contact. Break time of 5s. The reading detonated through me like a struck bell, resonant and total, and nothing like the doorframe, nothing like the cloth wrapping. Break time 05s, because this was skin to skin, and Kang Taeyang had meant what he said about no barriers. He had dropped everything. Break time points 05s, 3 years of pack instinct with nowhere to land. Break time 5s, the specific grief of an alpha whose designation demanded connection, and who had been choosing duty over that need for so long it had calcified into Break time 05s, something that looked like coldness from the outside and felt from the inside like a room with no windows. And underneath all of it, break time .05s, recent and raw and layered over everything else like a frequency that had retuned the whole signal. Me was thinking about me. Break time 05s had been thinking about me since the first day with a focused, helpless consistency that made the longing I had read from Minjin feel like a preview. Break time 5s, I pulled my hand back, the reading cut off. Break time E5s, I sat there with my bare hand in my lap and the echo of Kong Taeyong's entire interior world reverberating through my chest, and I could not speak. Break time 05s, could not arrange words, could not find the professional distance that had been my whole strategy because it was gone. Break time 05s, dissolved by 11 seconds of contact and 3 years of his quiet and devastating hope. He was watching me, patient. Break time 05s, completely exposed in a way I understood cost him enormously. Jiwoo, he said, and then the conference room door opened. Minjin stood in the doorway. Break time 05s, his eyes went to my bare hand, to Taeyong's hand on the table, to my face. Break time 505s, which was apparently readable enough in that moment that whatever he saw in it made something crack open behind his eyes that his containment could. Break time of fives not close fast enough. The silence lasted 1 second. 2. Then Minjin said very quietly, "You read him." Not an accusation. Break time 05s. Something closer to the sound a person makes when they realize the thing they were most afraid of has already begun. I opened my mouth. Break time 05s. My phone lit up on the table between us, a number I did not recognize, a message that made the air leave my lungs completely. Break time 05s, it read. "I know what you are, Seo Jiwoo, and so does the person who destroyed this pack 3 years ago. Walk away before they use you to finish it." Break time 05s, the room went absolutely still. Taeyong's expression changed into something I had not seen on him before. Fear. Break time 05s, not the performed caution of a man who managed risk professionally. Real fear. Break time 05s, the kind that lives in the body before the mind has finished processing why. Minjin had not moved from the doorway. His eyes were on my phone screen. Break time 05s. I watched the color drain from his face by degrees, slow and terrible, the way ice melts in reverse. I looked at the message again. Break time 05s, I know what you are, Seo Jiwoo. And so does the person who destroyed this pack 3 years ago. Walk away before they use you to finish it. Break time 05s destroyed this pack 3 years ago. Break time 05s. I pressed my bare hand flat against the table without thinking, and the residual emotional charge of the room slammed into me instantly. Too much. Break time .05s, too layered. Fear and guilt and something that felt like grief so old it had become structural, load-bearing. Break time .05s, the kind of grief a person builds their personality around because removing it would collapse everything else.
Break time 05s.
I pulled my hand back and pressed it into my lap and breathed. "Who sent that?" I said. My voice came out steadier than I deserved credit for. Break time 05s. Neither of them answered immediately, which was its own answer. Break time 05s, Taeyong. I said his name the way I had learned in 11 days of working here that made him actually look at me instead of through me. Break time 05s, who sent that message. He was looking at my phone with an expression that had moved past fear into something colder, recognition. Break time 05s. "I don't know the number," he said. "Then tell me." He looked at me. The pine and rain scent had gone sharp. Break times. The way alpha scent does when the body is deciding between fight and something more complicated than flight. Break time 05s. 3 years ago, the pack had 5 members, he said. The air shifted. I heard Minjin's breath catch in the doorway. "The 5th member left," Taeyong continued. Each word placed carefully, like stones across unstable water. "We were told it was voluntary, a choice. Break time equal 5's incompatibility after the trial bond period." He paused. "We believed it for 2 years. And the 3rd year," I said. "Break time 5's, we found evidence that it was not voluntary." His jaw tightened. Someone intervened. Break time .05's, someone with enough access to this pack's internal structure to make a forced separation look like a mutual decision. .05's, and then covered it well enough that it took us 2 years to find the edge of it. My psychometry was doing that reaching thing. Even without contact, break time 05's even across the table. Break time 05's, the emotional residue of what he was describing was thick enough to press against the insulation of my ability like weather against a window. Break time 5's, who was the 5th member, I said. Taeyong opened his mouth. Don't. It was Minjin, still in the doorway. Break time 05s. His voice was quiet, but it landed with enough weight to stop Taeyong completely. Break time 05s. He was looking at me with an expression I had not seen from him before. All the containment was gone. Break time 5s. What was underneath it was not the longing I had read through the cloth wrapping. It was something rawer. Something that looked break time equal 5s with horrible clarity, like protective terror. Not yet, Minjin said to Taeyong, still looking at me. He needs to know, Taeyong said. Break time .05s, he needs to be safe first. Minjin finally moved, stepping fully into the room. Break time .05s, and the sandalwood and old book scent wrapped around the space, and despite everything, break time equals 05s. Despite the message on my phone and the fear in the room and the fact that I was sitting in the middle of a 3-year-old wound, I had known nothing. Break time 05s. About 40 seconds ago, something in my chest oriented toward him the way it always did, that compass pull. Infuriating. Involuntary. Break time 05s. Completely beyond my management. He stopped at the corner of the table, close enough that I could see the muscle in his jaw working. Break time of 5s. Someone knows you're here, he said to me. Someone who knows about the pack. And they contacted you directly. Break time 5s. On a number that isn't your registered line. His eyes were very dark. How did they get that number? Break time 05s, Jiwoo. I had not told anyone I was taking this job except my shift supervisors. I had not posted about it. Break times 05s. I had told Congressman the Cockroach, but he had kept the secret admirably. I don't know, I said. They've been watching you, Minjin said. Break time 05s, possibly since the first day. The first day, the selection room. The wrong door, the wrong elevator, the wrong sky bridge at the wrong time. Break time 5.05s. I had spent 11 days telling myself it was an accident, a routing algorithm. A snap bag strap and a pair of gloves lost to Mapo Bridge wind. Break time 05s. The thought that arranged itself in the silence of my own mind was quiet and devastating. What if it was not an accident? 05s. What if someone had made sure I walked through that door? What if I had not tripped into this at all? What if I had been placed? I looked at my phone. Break time 05s at the unknown number. At the message sitting there with its careful, specific warning, and I thought about psychometry and how it worked. Break time 05s, how it read emotional truth from objects and surfaces and skin. Break time .05s. And I thought about the doorframe on the first day and the overwhelming crash of emotion that had hit me. Break time of 5s, all that compressed hope and anxiety and desperate wanting from hundreds of people. Break time .05s. And I thought about one specific thread in that reading that I had dismissed at the time, because it was too recent and too sharp and too deliberately. Break time 05s, not hope, not anxiety. Intention, someone had stood in that doorway very recently and felt something very specific and very directed. Break time 05s. And I had read it and filed it as background noise, because I was in the middle of a psychometric episode in front of 4 alphas, and I had not had the break time E5s bandwidth to examine every thread. I pressed my bare hand to the table edge. The doorframe echo was still in my memory, faint but accessible. Break time 5s, the way strong readings always left a trace. I chased that specific thread back through the residue. The intention sharpened, a face did not come. Break time .05 psychometry did not work that way. But an emotion did, layered and complex and deeply, deliberately cold, not hope, not anxiety, satisfaction. Break time 05s. Someone had stood in that doorway and felt satisfied. Like a plan coming together exactly as designed. I lifted my hand from the table. Break time 05s, my fingers were shaking, not from the reading, from what the reading meant. Jiwoo, Taeyong's voice, low, careful, I looked up. Break time equal 5s, both of them were watching me. Taeyong with that fear that had not left his face. Break time 05s, Minjin, with something that was trying very hard to be calm and failing at the edges. Someone arranged for me to be here, I said. Break time 05s, neither of them denied it. Denied it? You knew, I said. We suspected, Taeyong said, after the third day. The delivery routing was not random. Break times 05s. We had someone check. He held my gaze. We did not know who arranged it, or why. Break time .5s, or what they wanted you to find. But you kept me here anyway, I said. The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the room. Break time 05s. My chair scraped back. I stood up. Break time 05s. My glove was still on the table where I had left it before the reading, and I picked it up and pulled it on, and the familiar insulation settled over my break timing 05's hand like armor. I was only now appreciating the weight of Jiwoo, Minjin said. He took one step toward me and stopped. Break time 05s, like he had given himself a limit and was holding it by force of will. Please don't leave. The please undid something. Break time 05s. It was such a small word from a man who controlled everything about how he existed in a room. And it landed in the center of my chest and burned. Break time 05s. Then think here. Think where we can see you. His voice was very quiet. Whoever sent that message wants you isolated. Break time 05s wants you frightened, wants you to run. His eyes held mine. Break time 05s. Please don't give them that. I stood at the edge of the table with my gloves on and the echo of Taeyong's interior world still reverberating through. Break time L5's me and the ghost of Minjin's longing sitting in my chest like something I had grown around, and I thought about the first day. The wrong door. Break time 05's, the pair T. The four alphas who had looked at me like I was something they had not expected and could not stop noticing. Break time 05's, and somewhere down the hall, Oh Sejun's office door opened. Doha's voice low and urgent. Break time 05's carrying through the glass walls, with the specific tone of a man who had just found something he had been looking for and wished he had not. Taeyang. Break time 05's, you need to see this now. Taeyang moved toward the door, stopped, looked back at me. The fifth member, he said. Break time CO5's name was Seo Hanjin. The room tilted, Seo my name. I heard my own heartbeat in the silence that followed, loud and singular. Break time 05's the way sound narrows when the world is reorganizing itself around a truth you were not prepared to receive. Hanjin, I said. Break time 5's. My voice came from somewhere far away. That's my brother's name. Taeyong's face confirmed it before he said a single word. Break time 5's, and the pine and rain scent hit me like the first day all over again. Overwhelming and total. Break time 05's. But this time it was not attraction and it was not comfort. Break time .05's. This time it was the specific scent of an alpha who had just watched the person they were falling for discover that everything, every accident, break time of 5's, every wrong door and snap bag strap and routing algorithm had been arranged not by an enemy, by someone who loved me. Break time .05's. My phone buzzed one more time, one final message from the unknown number. Ask them what happened to your brother. Break time .05's. Then nothing. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. Break time 05's, it's as crazier and more intriguing as can ever imagine. So do check it out. If that ending wrecked you, hit subscribe. The next one will be hotter, Mukky BL.